All right,
Okay.
we'll record.
Yep, we're good. Thank you, Bart.
All right. So we just passed the meeting minutes from May 12th. Item 2, moving on to item 3, annual election of CDA chair and vice chair. With respect to chair, I'm happy to continue if the CDA so desires. I've had a chance to talk to Mike and to John Kraus, and Mike has been our vice chair, and they said she'd be happy to step down from that position. I did get a chance. John is not on, wasn't able to be on this call. I did talk to him, and he is interested in the vice chair role. Obviously, that's, as we know, there's not any specific responsibilities, I would say, to the vice chair. Obviously, stepping in when the chair is not available, those kinds of things. So John is interested in taking on that role. Thinking long term, I believe I hit my term limit in 2 years, right? I think 2022 is my final. So from a succession planning, I think we want to start thinking about that. So not that we have to decide that now, but for purposes of this discussion, I would put forward a slate of myself as chair and John Kraus as vice chair. Happy to open that up to conversation. Anybody have any input, thoughts on that?
Could I second that motion?
I don't know if I was moving.
I don't think it was a motion.
Oh.
Yeah.
I will make Kathy Stokerbrand making a motion to approve the slate.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that?
I would like to register my absolute enthusiasm for Peter Hammond and the job he had. No, I'm dead serious, Peter. I keep meaning to email you and tell you how impressed I was and pleased with the job you did on the last couple of months. It's been impressive to be a witness to. So I couldn't vote more enthusiastically yay in favor of that motion.
I appreciate
Joel's
that,
age.
but just remember, Joe, all the heavy lifting was done by Mark, Rebecca, Bart, Steph,
Like a true leader, he's demure.
Well,
Self-effacing even.
well, good. All right. So motion is second, and some discussion. All good. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. No, I forget. Does that go to the board, or is that done?
That's done.
Okay. Okay. Next item is item 4, review of the 2019 TID reports. Mark, I don't know if you want to take us through these. I think I like these reports. I think they're clean and kind of lay out the status of each one, but maybe if you want to just walk us through each one of them so everybody sees what we're looking at. I think we're starting on page 10 of the packet.
Sure. These are copies of the reports that on Form PE 300 that the Department of Revenue has local governments complete each year, kind of an update on the activity of their TID districts. It starts out with the beginning funding balance, and just from TID 1 perspective, that's $884,000 and change. It shows the increment that we received then in 2019. A couple other categories of revenues there, comes up with a total on the bottom. The second page of that report then, we'll talk about section 4, that's expenditures. Shows some of our expenditures. Interest and fiscal service charges are related to debt payments. Principal on long-term debts, pretty self-explanatory. Again, in our TID districts at this point, by and large, it's fairly straightforward. So you have revenues, you have expenditures, gives you a new fund balance at the end of the year. Keep in mind that if you weren't aware, the village did call and pay off early one of the TID 1 bonds that was out there. So that's why our principal payments were so high, and
Yep.
we did not increase our fund balance, but we spent it down to reduce our interest costs in the long term there. We still have about $3.5 million of bonds and interest and other miscellaneous costs coming up in the next 2 years, this year being 2020 and then in 2021. My rough estimate is we'll bring in about $4.5 million in increment, and that should, again, these are very, very rough numbers, but there's spots on the form. Just, I think the intent of those spots is to provide any red flags if you think you're going to run short. But we figure we should have about $1 million in TID reserves in 2021 when the TID would be eligible to close.
Great.
And Mark, could you, just curious what the exempt computer aid line is?
That is a funding source from the state when they exempted personal computers from the personal property tax. It's just some loose end stuff that comes in, but they have a separate category for that. In certain districts, that can be a pretty big number, but not so much in our case.
Okay. All right. So as everybody can see, each one of the TID has a specific report here. One other question, Mark, I had was just on, I'm just curious on TID 3, the negative beginning of your balance. You know what, because just in looking at sort of the tax increment compared to the principal and interest payments, there's, you know, very positive. So I'm curious how we started the year with a negative balance.
Well, the TID 3 was created just in time for the economy to tank out, right?
The last time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a prospective development that was being contemplated. So the TID district was created, and it just didn't happen. So there was some funds spent on there. You know, we've had some debt payments, and then eventually the Harbor Chase facility was built, and then now, of course, the Sherman project is completed. We're going to see that $677,000 of tax increment really did not reflect a significant portion of the Sherman project, as of January 1st, 19, they were not fully built. So we're going to see a larger number in 2020. I can actually just, by 2020, we're at 855,000 in 2020, and we'll probably be more than that in 2021. I haven't done those numbers. So we had some carrying costs that we were expending before we started getting increment. That's kind of how that goes. It's been moving in the right direction. Obviously, if you flip to the second page of the TID 3 report, you see now that we're in the black, per se. We have a positive $184,000 fund balance at the end of 2019.
Yep.
And that trend will continue again until we acquire enough increments to pay off the PAYGO loan that the village entered into with the Sherman project, and then that district could potentially close 2027 or so. Again, it's a little, as with all of my projections, I say the further away they are, the more subject they are to variations. So
Yes.
we'll update those each year and take a look at the tables that I now include in the village's long-range financial plan. for the cash flow pro forma of the TID districts, which we used to do at the CDA level, but because of the fact that there's no substantial activity in those TID districts anymore for new projects, it's a much more straightforward analysis. So,
Thank you for that background. I think that's helpful for all the CDA members. And then to Mark's point, moving to page 22, as you see the start of the charts that Mark was referencing, and again, the projected year of closure for the TID. So these all continue to line up with the expectations that we've had in place. Yeah, so fairly straightforward information, but always good for us to look and make sure that we continue to be on the path of closing in the time frame that we had expected. So Mark, any other comments you have for this report, or does any members of the CDA have any questions for Mark?
no, again, I would just say things are moving along as we generally expected. Obviously, if you go back to pro formas from 10 years ago or 5 years ago, there's differences, but we continually refresh that data and make sure that, number one, we're going to be closing before the mandatory close dates, and number two, that we just have a general understanding of how those districts are doing, and ultimately, when those districts do close, they provide some additional taxable value to the community and help defray the tax burden on our residential populations. So that's a good thing.
Very good.
Mark, this is probably more a question out of ignorance than anything, but given the economic environment that we're in right now, I would think tax revenue would be impacted to some degree. Just curious for your thoughts on, or maybe not. I don't know. I guess that's the question.
Well, the primary way that I would envision our tax revenue being impacted for our TID districts is, let's say the bottom falls out on the rent rates of retail. So those properties may petition for a lower assessed value in 2020. And maybe they get it, maybe they don't. There are a large portion of residential components in apartment buildings, mixed use, in all of our TID districts. So that's a very strong mitigating factor against that.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, all of the underlying governmental entities still need to function. Again, the only way that the TID districts take a substantial hit is if they lose value. So I'm not going to predict the future, but I think, again, our general diversity within TID 1 and the strength of the other projects within the TIDs 3, 4, and 5 would make that, I think, a very modest impact, if anything.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions from anybody on those reports?
No, I'm clear.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. And then obviously related to the TID discussion, moving on to item 5 is something I think everybody's heard of sort of mention, which is this concept of we have the ability to extend. So TID 1 will be closing soon. We have the ability to extend it for a year, or I guess propose an extension for a year to a number of bodies for purposes of affordable housing. So on page, Mark kindly put together a memo to us on page 26, just kind of outlining this. as we look at the timing, as we work our way back, we would, as Mark states in the memo, we would need to, if we were to do something, we would need to make a recommendation to the village board by the end of 2020 in order to hit the times that come after that. So maybe I'll turn it over to Mark and Rebecca and others, just, if you want to walk us through this a little bit. But again, this will be this is the first of many. As the agenda says, this is no decision today. We just thought we need to start talking about this. If anybody has any questions about how this works, we can have that dialogue today, and we'll just kind of continue to move it forward and lay out a game plan of decisions we need to make, what the timeline looks like, if we make a recommendation at the end of the year, and then what it looks like through the end of the TID. So maybe with that, I'll turn it over to Mark and/or Rebecca if there are any other comments you have on this.
Sure, I'll start out with a brief overview and then turn it over to Rebecca for some additional comments if there are any. This is something that has been in the background for a number of years, and the time to bring it to the forefront has come. So we would anticipate ultimately that the CDA would contemplate a recommendation to the board to either extend or not to extend. But in correlation with that, the decision to recommend for an extension has to be accompanied by a very specific use or uses with the state. So you have to have a program in place, or at least a defined parameters of what the agreed upon use of those funds would be, kind of as we outline in the memo. And that's going to take a little time to work through. So hopefully those discussions will be a part of the strategic planning that's coming up for the CDA for the rest of this year. And again, by the end of the year, I think is a good time frame to make a recommendation to the board so that they have ample time to contemplate, how they feel about that, and if there's any additional discussion that needs to go on, that gives us a couple months to have that discussion as well. So with that, I'll kind of turn it over to Rebecca if you have anything to add to that.
I don't have anything to add other than, we wanted to provide the information, and we'll also be sending it out to the village board today, just so everyone has a primer before we go into our next meeting for strategic planning. So on that note, I'll be sending out a doodle poll to the board and the CDA members so that they can respond back to me relative to their availability for scheduling that second strategic planning session with Baker Tilly.
Great.
So Mark, excuse me, if just the recommendation to the village board sort of at the end of 2020, that would need to be a detailed, is that a sort of a detailed project plan, like specific down to specific components of it, or is it a framework we present to them? What would you say that looks like? I guess my question, do we have to do all the work on it before the presentation to the village board, or do we present a concept and then there's kind of additional work after that?
Well, that's a great question. I know on the submission we would have to submit to the state. They're going to want something along the lines that these funds will be used to provide developer incentives to encourage affordable housing under whatever section of affordable housing you want to identify as being applicable for the community, or to provide incentives to current apartment building owners to participate in affordable housing programs, or you know, I mean, the details of that does not have to be completely hammered out, although I would think that that would be, as far as along that line as you could get, would be advantageous to that process.
Yep.
Many facets of how you can comply with that requirement for affordable housing. And then, of course, there's the caveat that there is a 25% of that money that can be used for other housing improvement, housing stock improvements. Now, that does not need to be detailed, but again, I think there's been a wide range of suggestions about, you know, various programs that could help improve our housing stock in numerous aspects. Obviously, you know, right now we're thinking it's about $2 million that would be. So 500,000 of that would be 25%. Now, that doesn't mean you have to spend 25%. That's the limit. You have to spend at least 75% on affordable housing. So.
Okay. So again, this is the start of this discussion. Does any of the CDA members have any questions?
About how long are you envisioning the first, this next meeting would be? What kind of chunk of time are we looking at?
For the strategic planning meeting?
Right.
I don't know, Rebecca, if you have a thought on that. I mean, I think we're looking at obviously a couple hours. I forget how long the last one was. You know, again, now that, well, I'm assuming we'll still be in a virtual environment.
Yeah.
I've been on a lot of virtual meetings, as I'm sure everybody has. It's hard to keep people engaged for 2 hours is a long virtual meeting. We know that. So that's my thought, you know, and we'll do the best we can, and we want to be as efficient as possible. Go ahead, Joe.
I have a question. What where the origin of this priority is coming from? I'm just, I don't. Did our study suggest or was this like something that the people voted for? Because just in my own interactions as I represent the CDA, I've not heard this voiced by. I've heard a lot of things that I would like the CDA to address, but this is not one of them. So just wondering why this is a priority.
Yeah, sorry, that's a great
where
question.
where it would even be done.
Yeah, so I would not, well, right now, I would not classify this as a priority. What we were saying is this is an option for us. As we look at TID1 coming to closure, there is, again, we do have the ability to do this. Other communities have done this as well. So I would say this is not at the point of a recommendation. We are at the point of investigation to kind of say, is this something we would want to do? What does it look like? How would we do it? So again, that's to Mark's point of, you know, this is a heavy lift, and the end of the year is going to be here tomorrow. So there's a bunch of different steps we have to go through, but you're right. The first one is kind of the what is this, and do we want to do this? As you know, we've heard there have been expressions of a desire to look at affordable housing and what can we do. You know, I have heard those. I think the village board has heard some of those. So, you know, I would say there's that talk, and so this option does kind of play into those discussions. So, but again, I would say this is investigation at this point for the CDA to first make a determination, is this something we want to do? And again, I think that's part.
Peter, this is Kathy Stokerbrand. May I ask who just asked that question? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Oh, sorry, that was
Joe
Lesage.
Thank you. Okay, so I understand your question, and I agree. You know, it definitely has to come from with a lot of strength, because clearly it would be a big commitment. I think one of the things is the results of the housing survey that was done within the last year show that affordable housing came to the top.
Right.
Was one of the top items that was in the needs to improve category, I guess. that's a survey that I agree we don't necessarily have to do that, but we definitely would need to have a lot of support to go down this path.
And I think some of the challenge, you know, if you ask 50 people, you get 50 definitions of what affordable housing means. So, you know, I agree, is having people say that on a survey is one thing, you know, being able to implement a program that does.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's tied to the program that was just being discussed with the mandatory spending, like percentages and requirements is for, I think people, well, whatever. I'll table that for now.
Yeah, it's a good question. So again, this is a multi-step process we're going to need to go through.
Peter, I did have one more question. This is Kathy.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I speak? It's hard.
Of course.
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to know, could you explain a little bit more? How much are we paying? Does anybody know what are we paying Baker Tilly, and what is their role exactly? Because I'm new to the CDA. Is it in a nutshell for me, please?
Specifically for the strategic planning?
For this, yeah. What are we paying them to do for us? How far down this road? Like if we decide we do want to extend the TIF one more year?
No. So we engaged Baker Tilly. Rebecca can speak better than me, but we've had one strategic planning meeting. There's been a lot of work, a lot of planning building up to this. Again, this is, as you know, a joint venture between Village Board and the CDA to, again, as we look forward, what are the strategic priorities? Let's make sure we're all on the same page. What do we want to be working on? So Baker Tilly is, was approved by both the board and the CDA as a facilitator of this process. So this is one element of that strategic planning process, this question of the TID extension, because I would say, we're always looking at what's in our toolkit, what do we have available to us. This is clearly something that is available. The question of whether we're going to do it or not is the next, I would say, a separate question. And we are hopeful that out of the strategic planning discussion, we will get an answer to that from the CDA and the Village Board. So Rebecca, I don't know if you have anything to add. I don't know the exact amount we're paying Baker Tilly, I forget.
Sure, and just to, before I start, if anyone's not speaking, if they could just mute their microphone, I think that would be helpful. So we started a process, the Village Board and the CDA went out for an RFP for a financial consultant. We previously had worked with somebody else, and that's how we came to work with Baker Tilly. They came into a role in my years are going to slide, but in 2019, I believe, we hired them on board. Both the Village Board and the CDA agreed to that. We found that there was good merit in having that financial advisor be the same. Because they're definitely correlated in terms of how we make policy here in the village. So we solidified them, and then there was Chair Hammond, President Rusick, and Trustee Amenta, who collaboratively put forward an initiative for strategic planning and TID policy development for both the CDA and the Village Board in the 2019 initiatives. And a part of that was to engage Baker Tilly, who also had a strong economic development arm to kind of guide us through the process, because one of the end results I think that was desired from that process was a TID policy and how we would utilize that tool, as Peter said, amongst the other tools that we have with economic development. We have had one meeting, which I believe, Kathy, you participated in as a candidate for a trustee. Just prior to COVID, or right as COVID was happening. They are engaged with us for only 2 strategic planning sessions. And I think one of the overarching goals of doing some type of strategic planning together is to ensure that there's some level of agreement amongst both groups in terms of how we're going to proceed. Because I think one of the challenges that's inevitably there is that if the CDA can do some things independently, but there are also projects that require that collaboration between both groups. So if there's not some level of general understanding and education, really, from a background perspective about what's here, what data we're looking at, where we're going, we're not going to be in a position to make much progress with whatever progress looks like as defined by the group. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of diversity in that opinion. So if they're, I've also had to back up and try to get realistic about what the outcome could be of the strategic planning session. And I think if there can just be if there's some level of a majority agreement around certain topics, I think that our two groups could have some momentum to really allow us to work for you and finding solutions based upon where there is consensus.
Okay, thank you. And just one more clarification then. Baker Tilly will be working with us through the end of this year?
No, so we engage them for they're going to do the second, facilitate the second strategic planning discussion, and then they're going to close out of strategic planning with us. They,
okay,
outside of strategic planning, we have retained them to be the village and the CDA's financial advisor. So you, as a trustee, will see Baker Tilly coming up next in July and August, because we're going to be going out for bonding and other issues. So you're going to see them in, working on, and they work with Mark frequently on all of our bond refundings, all of our financial projections, and how we proceed with a lot of elements that really correlate to the LRP.
All right. Okay, so no other questions on it. Again, this is something at the start of the process. It'll be, so everybody just get that in your in your head. This is, this is a heavy lift. As Rebecca said, that next strategic planning meeting, we're going to want to get a lot done in that meeting. Obviously, we'll still have Baker Tilly won't go away. They're still around and supporting the village from the financial perspective, so we still have them there. But this next one is, I would say, is an important meeting for us to really get, to Rebecca's point, really get some agreement, understanding about what the initiatives and projects are moving forward, so staff can help, we can manage staff's time and staff's efforts around those things. Okay. If no other questions on item 5, let's move to item 6. I don't know, Rebecca, maybe I'll just turn this over to you if you want to give an update on where.
Sure, be happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Hammond and Director Griepentrog and Director Emanuelson and I have now had 2 conversations with WIBIC. As you'll recall, last year we froze the business loan program. Going back in just history of the program, about 2 bid directors ago, there was someone who was in that position who was doing a large part of the administration of the business loan program and an advertisement of that. And then as the position changed over and the frequency and the use of the program waned, we did a desktop review of it in 2019, and it was our staff strong recommendation that we find a third party to really work on the administration of this program for a couple of reasons. Number one, we don't like to hold people's individual financial documents here because they're subject to open records. And number 2, a business loan program is that, and it's lending. And if you're not working in that arena on a daily basis and have a very good sound experience with that, there's a lot of legal ramifications and advisement that can occur that's best suited by someone who is geared specifically towards providing that type of an environment. So at the time, the CDA and the board elected to freeze that program. And so the funds are there, and one option that Peter had proactively wanted to pursue was a relationship with WIBIC. We've now had 2 phone conversations with them to have an understanding about how they work with other communities. We had another one on June 3rd, and I think a result of that conversation is that they were going to provide us with a written outline of perhaps how they would be able to assist the CDA. One of the things that we learned through our discussion with them is that they typically, and they relate a charge of about 15% annually in an administration fee on the loans and lending. For a number of the communities they provide that service for, those communities have CDBG funds that are available to them in a specific, a different designation category that we have here in Shorewood. So many of those communities are using and funneling their CDBG funds to fund the administration of this program. Whereas in
Rebecca,
yeah.
Sorry, could you just explain what those, I don't know if there are people on the CDA that don't know what those funds are. Could you just take a quick minute?
Sure, and you know what, I'm actually gonna have Bart jump in. Bart, I'll help, because he's kind of our rep on CDA,
Yeah.
so I'll let you, or CDBG, so I'll maybe let you take over for CDBG and then I can jump back in later.
Yep.
Sure. So CDBG is Community Development Block Grant Funds through the federal government. And so in Shorewood's case, we received those funds as part of a consortium of Milwaukee suburban communities. But the city of Milwaukee, city of West Dallas, and city of Wauwatosa receive their own funds. So to Rebecca's point, many larger communities receive funds specifically to them that they can choose how to allocate. Whereas in our case, we in theory could receive a portion of funds, but we have to apply back to the county to get them. So in the past, we have used them. We haven't used them in the last 4 or 5 years, is my understanding. We probably would have $15,000 to $20,000 to work with, but they're highly restricted in terms of using them for a low to moderate income recipient or a low to moderate area, LMI and LMA. We don't have qualifying LMA districts that are, easy to use in. So what we would have to use would be an LMI. So we'd have to prove that the recipients are a certain level of income. And so it's really difficult for communities like Shorewood, which receives a small portion, and we'd have to essentially fight with other communities to make sure we get that, to guarantee that we would have those funds available. It's not that they're not possible, but if we were to get them, every year is a different story. So whereas in Milwaukee, West Dallas, and Wauwatosa and Kenosha, Racine, places like that, they probably have a guaranteed amount that unless the federal government removes the program that they can allocate towards that, whereas we wouldn't have that level of assurity. So hope that provides some perspective.
And Bart, just for me, is it our determination to be part of the consortium, or is it because of the makeup of our community that we need to be part of it? Theoretically, could we be on our own?
We could not. We're not. We don't have the demographics to qualify. So
okay.
So first of all, yeah, it's the municipal level. Then it goes to the county level. So the combination of us with the other communities qualifies Milwaukee County to receive them. We would not have to participate, and actually that discussion is coming up next month. And so it's a 3-year agreement. And so in the past, we always have participated. Because we participate, the Milwaukee County, gets an additional 13,000 people for their application. If we wouldn't do that, they would receive less. And so we have partnered with the other communities to do so. With that, we have the option every year to submit a program for consideration. If we don't, that money then reverts to the county's home improvement funds that does go to qualifying individuals throughout the county, of which Shorewood has received some of those funds. So if we don't participate, the county's pot gets smaller. So participating helps them out, and then it gives us the option to submit programs every year. If we don't submit a program, it just defunds to their general usage. So that conversation is coming up at the board at the July 6th meeting to continue participation, which I would presume that we would do.
Thank you.
So one of the other options that we asked WIBIT to give some consideration to is what an administrative fee would be if we paid on a per loan basis. Because one of the challenges is that we don't know how many people would utilize the program, how that would look. So they're going to give some thought to that, put some notes to paper, and then get back to us likely about next week.
And So there's a lot of components to the WIBIC thing. One of the things we liked about it is that, well, obviously WIBIC is involved, would be involved in the underwriting of the loan, the administration of the loan, and then they also have a, I forget the exact terms, business consultant that would be assigned to each business that has a loan. So these are experienced people that are really very effective advisors to the small business owner and are really available to them, not even just sort of specific to the loan program, but helping them with their business. And we were just really taken by that idea that within this program, there's a built-in sort of support mechanism, expertise mechanism that, again, as we down the road contemplate if this is the right path, that, you know, I think that should be factored into the cost of it. I think there's real value to the business community of having that. And so, you know, it's going to cost money to have WIBIC do this. Obviously, you can't ask them to do it for free. You get what you pay for doing things for free. But to me, the nice thing is they're not just doing sort of the nuts and bolts of it. They've got some real value-added components that I think we as the CDA can say it's part of our investment back into the business community to help them succeed. And boy, sort of can't think of a better time to have that as right now. I mean, just, we know, I mean, Steph can talk to us in a minute, you know, what the business community is going through is, you know, generational. And to have one business owner try to figure this out on their own, it's just impossible. And so if we can help in any way, businesses work their way through this, you know, there's value there. So there have been good conversations. I believe sort of the ball is in WIBIC's court to evaluate this and see if they can come back with a program that financially would work for us. But we're moving, I would say this is moving, these conversations are happening quickly. This is moving fairly quickly. So I'm encouraged. I'm sure there'll be some roadblocks and challenges we confront, but at this point, I am hopeful that we can come up with something here.
And Peter, if I can just support the comments that you're making relative to the resources that they provide, you know, as administration here, looking at how this was done before, so many times business owners, they want advisement.
Yeah.
Right? And we're not in a position to provide that advisement. Whereas WIBIC has legal advisors, right, who do this and who focus on these things all of the time. So it's one of those things where we want to try to connect people with resources, but we're just not the best group suited to provide some of those services.
Yeah.
But if the CDA were willing to fund that component, then that becomes something different.
And then to me, we've got this program and, you know, Steph with the bid. I mean, to me, those are some really powerful tools and resources we bring to bear to the business community. You know, that to me works into recruiting. You know, again, as we all, well, maybe we don't all remember, I mean, the business loan program, it was a good program. I think it operationally had some challenges, but it just wasn't being utilized for a lot of different reasons. And again, this element of actually having resources as part of it, I think will make it be more attractive to the business community. And just to Rebecca's point, another component is this frees up staff time to do the other work that they should be doing and not administering a loan program. And again, there's value in that as well. So those are all, to me, kind of things we're going to want to think about as we, I hopefully, as ideally, we get a proposal back that we can put in front of the CDA to decide if that's a path we want to go down. All right, any questions for anybody on that? This is, I would have to do a shout out to David on this. This really came out of, you know, she, as everybody I think knows, she's been looking at ways to support women in minority-owned businesses in Shorewood, and in her research, she had found where WIBIC was doing some things related to that in Kenosha and other areas. And so that was really what started the conversation with WIBIC. And as we talked to them, we were like, wow, this is exactly the program we're looking for. We've got the funds sitting there waiting to be used. So boy, if we could bring this all together, it would really be exciting. So thank you, David, even though she's not on the call, thank you to her for really starting that off. Okay, with that, I think we move to item 7, which starts on page 29. So Bart, I don't know if you want to.
I'm sorry, Peter, can I ask
yes.
one question quick?
Yes.
So would this be a new thing for Shorewood? Have we, since we started the business loan program, this would be the first time that we would farm out the administration?
So yeah, go ahead.
Well, Sewer Pack was doing, there was a retired gentleman from Sewer Pack.
That's right.
Who worked part-time, who was processing some of the information and had worked with Jim Plaisted on reviewing more of the financial components. But it was not necessarily, Jim did a lot of the upfront work with applicants. So their part was very minimal. And quite frankly, they were kind of almost just a third party holding the financial documents.
Right.
Okay.
So that we wouldn't necessarily have to have them here. Now that person has expressed that it would be better suited to have this done by a third party.
Okay.
And I think he's also looking at a point where he's not going to be with Sewer Pack anymore, and they don't do this component.
Okay.
If we
So
don't find,
we did pay them something to do this.
it was correct, and it was minimal. It was like $250 an application.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any ballpark idea what this might cost?
Right now, what WIBIC reflected to us is they usually do 15% on an annual basis. So we've asked them to consider what it would look like on a per loan basis or some other options based upon how they could proceed. And so we're looking to get that back from them.
Yeah, and obviously just to be clear, you know, a 15% structure doesn't work for us, because that means over time our loan balance goes down and goes away and basically has gone to WIBIC for payment of that. So I don't see how we get that model to work. So that's why we asked them, is we need to, and again, they need to be paid. Obviously they're bringing great resources to bear. There are costs there. And so again, we're trying to see if there's a way to thread that needle where it works for them economically, but it also works for us economically. And I guess it's a great question, Kathy, because the other point, obviously with this, we would need to revisit the whole loan program and probably rewrite the whole loan program, given if we did go down the path with WIBIC, given their role and how that all looks. So this, you know, I think we could start from our document, from our policy, and work from there, but it would require us to really work through that again to make it effective.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so then turning over to Bart, again, everybody's got his write-up. He's got a number of items on here. I don't want to have him have to go through each line item. Maybe, Bart, if you just want to point out any key items you think on this list, and then we can open up for questions from people.
Sure. Yeah, quickly as an overview in terms of new businesses, the Skin Bar at the former Hayek building is progressing, as well as Hyatt Taco. So those are the two new businesses that we've been working with to get them up and running. Both we're hoping for June 1st, but I don't believe either of them quite made it. So, but shortly. So those are the two new businesses. In terms of events and updates, comprehensive planning was approved by the village board on Monday to work with Vandewall and Associates. So I'm working with the contract. I have a call with them actually after this call to firm that up. So we'll be going full gear into that. The CDA will play a role in terms of economic development chapter. So that will be coming our way as well. Transportation and parking analysis is going back to the board on July 6th for some financial analysis and recommendations on changing some parking regulations. So that's kind of a big chunk on our plate. I mentioned the CDBG is also going back to the board on July 6th. I've been working with the county on that. And then in terms of grants and loans, obviously you guys have all been involved with the Emergency Business Assistance Program. So that was a big May activity, but we also did reimburse 3 of the remaining outstanding facade grants. So with that, we only have 1 still left out there, the signage for Hayataco. So once that has been done, those funds will all be completed. So at that point, the balance of that program will be down to 0. And then discussion as to whether or not it comes back, will take place in the future. But general overview, the rest of it is in the report. So if there's any questions, fire away.
Hey, it's Steph, everyone. I just want to thank everybody on the CDA for making that the grants happen. Our business community they're so grateful and excited, and it's just pretty amazing that we were able to get that to come through. So I just want to thank you all.
Steph, I just had a question for you relative to the program that you're doing with the Shorewood Foundation. What has the interest been, and what's the pot of funds that are going to be available to businesses?
So there's a $25,000 available to us right now. And I was initially targeting some of the businesses that weren't eligible for the CDA grant for those, like some of our mental health therapists were able to get some funds, and those grants are capped at $2,500. And then I reached out to a couple other businesses from recommendations from other businesses, and I haven't gotten like a ton of response on those. So I just actually had told the foundation that I'm probably going to just reopen it again to the entire business list, because I know that some people are also applying for some other funds as PPE is starting to run out for people. So I'm going to open it up again and see what kind of response I get. I know that the foundation is still taking donations. I don't know what those numbers are. I just know about the 25,000 I have right now.
And Steph, sorry, I was muted after you finished. You thanked us, but we should be thanking you for all the work. I mean, that was a massive lift on your part. You were out in the community. You know, your feedback to us and was invaluable, I think, to making it be successful. So from the CDA, thank you for that. That was, stepping into the role out of the gates and stepping into this. I mean, I guess a great way to learn the Shorewood business community and get to know everybody.
Exactly.
That was quite an undertaking. So again, as always, successful things are a team effort, and this was a serious team effort. So thank you for that. Actually, I'm curious, just your sense, business tone, how is the business community feeling? Are we hearing any indications of interest from other businesses looking to come in? Just give us a gauge of kind of where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard just from all of our, because I'm still, connected to all the districts in Milwaukee too, that a little bit of jealousy maybe that we were able to pull that off, and just, very complimentary about, wow, that's pretty amazing that everybody was able to work together to make that happen. And then, even for us reopening, we've had a lot more direction from the village and the health department. We've had just so much support. And I think that other communities are noticing that, those things are happening. So, our district is really hopeful, and a lot of other areas are just very, very, very frustrated. So we're going to just keep plugging along for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Steph or Bart on the bid and PDD reports?
I have one question. I apologize. This is Kathy. I dropped the phone call. How much money, the $25,000 grant from the foundation, you said you'd reopen it. How much is left?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I've given out, I don't have that spreadsheet pulled up. I've probably given out almost 10. So there's not a lot left in there. But again, I know that the foundation said that they are getting in donations. I just don't know what that amount is at this point either. I know that Jennifer from the foundation was literally handwriting 500 donor cards, or sending cards out to 500 of their donor list. So I know that more donations will be coming in.
But the initial donation was 25, is that correct? 25,000?
Correct.
Okay, and how much is that all gone?
No. That's what I'm saying. I think, I don't have that right in front of me, I think, but I've given out maybe 10,000, not even.
So there's still 15,000 left.
Correct.
Wow, okay, good to know, thank you.
All right. Then moving on to item 8, which is just, as was requested, the list of the recipients. So you see that that list. So we, as we knew, I think at the time, we were able to fund just under 64% of the requests. So again, a good effort by all. Great group, great list of businesses here. So yeah, I don't know if anybody had any questions or comments on that. I think we just wanted visibility to the list and the broad basis of the support. Okay. If not, date for the strategic planning. Sorry, Rebecca, remind me of that.
We have a couple that we're going to be sending out to you guys this morning, June 22nd, June 29th, July 13th, 20th, or 27th. We're going to see what the majority is for moving forward.
Excellent. All right. Look at that, right at an hour. Well done, team. All righty. If no other items, motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right. We got a so move and a second at the same time. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Excellent.
I never have heard an objection to an objection.
I know. Never. Well, thank you again, everybody. Thanks for your time, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.